Numbers up, Michelle.
All right, we are
Okay, we can
live
start, I
on
guess.
Facebook, so we'll go ahead and get started now. Thank you so much for joining us and participating in this month's webinar program. My name is Michelle Long, and I serve on the board of directors. We are currently seeking new committee members and board members, so if you or someone you know is passionate about birding or conservation, please visit our website to learn more about those opportunities. Tonight, our goal is for you to get a better understanding of what our out of town, or in this case, out of state field trips entail and what an amazing experience it provides. We feel free to ask questions. You should have a Q&A pod on your screen inside the Zoom. And the questions aren't visible to other participants, so you won't be disturbing anyone with your questions, and we'll do our best to answer your questions as they come, and we'll reserve a little portion at the end for Q&A just for Gallus and Dale. So I will now turn over tonight's program to Dale, who is our field trip coordinator.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Tonight, we have one of my favorite Florida guides joining us, and he was a great guide on the trip. Gallus and I met back in 2013 after 2012 having a significant fallout and seeing all the birds down the Dry Tortugas. We wanted to get down there. So we took the group down, and Gallus was one of the guides on the boat. And so we have done overnighters together to Kissimmee and Merritt and a few other places, and many more to come, I hope. Tell us a little bit about your job, Gallus.
Well, I'm Gallus Quigley. I officially work for Lake County Office of Parks and Trails as the recreation coordinator for trails, and trails meaning multi-purpose standalone trails. So your biking trails, basically. And I also, with my wife, do archaeopteryx birding and nature tours. So in the two things, I stay very busy. I lead trips for a lot of the local festivals, Space Coast, Festival of Flags and Flowers, North Shore, the North Shore Birding and Wildlife Festival. So, and I'm the, for those of you knowing Christmas bird counts coming up, the Zillwood Mount Dora Christmas bird count. I'm the co-compiler with Wes Biggs for that. I'm actually the compiler. Wes is just there to back me up. He's been doing it for so long. He's a wealth of knowledge that can't be passed up.
All right. Thank you. Let's get started.
Okay, here we go. So this is going to cover our trip to three of America's, I'm going to say, greatest national parks. We have a lot of great national parks, but these are probably three of the most well-known: Glacier, Yellowstone, and Grand Teton. So let's start with some background on these. Glacier National Park was established in 1910 by President Taft. It's over 1 million acres, and it goes, it's in Montana and goes right up to the border with Canada. Yellowstone National Park was established in 1872 by President Grant. It's considered America's first national park and is generally considered to be the world's first national park as well. And it's over 2.2 million acres. And Grand Teton is established in 1929 by Coolidge and is over 310,000 acres. And this is one of the American avocets we saw while we were out there. Beautiful bird in full breeding plumage, quite striking. So we arrived July 10th, got in from our various points of origin, got ourselves in our 2 minivans and headed out to Pompey's Pillar National Monument. This was on Dale's big visitation list, and it turned out to be a great spot. We had 25 species there, got our first taste of our kind of some of the birds we see out west. And then we followed that up by a little conservation area found near inside Billings called Shiloh Conservation Area, which we had 18 more species. This is a picture of the pillar. So some of the quick birds we had there, we had The pillar had nesting cliff swallows all along the face. And in amongst these, there was one white-throated swift, which is way too fast to get pictures of. I tried. We had a yellow-bellied marmot, which I believe was our first mammal of the trip. And one of 22 species we ended up seeing of mammals. We had least flycatcher and yellow-breasted chat. They were very vocal, and we finally got this one to come out where we could actually see it, because we could hear them everywhere. We also had lazuli bunting. We had yellow warblers were everywhere. I mean, I swear when we were in the outside of the Billings area, yellow warblers may have been the bird of the, they were just that, and later on western meadowlark.
Yeah.
So then we went on to Shiloh Conservation Area, where we had our only muskrat of the trip. And we picked up some butterflies. We had orange sulfur and our first yellow-headed blackbirds. The next day we headed out, and Dale, anytime you want to add something, just jump in, okay?
Okay.
So day 2, we headed out to the prairie. So this is a picture from East Lick Road outside of Moult, Montana, very appropriate name. So we had 18 species. This area, we're not out there for, we're not going to see 100 different species here. We're out there for very specific birds. These are prairie species. So one of the stops as we get out on East Lick Road is called Corral Pond, where we had 19 species. We had a bunch of our waterfowl. After that, we stopped at Pictograph Cave State Park, where we had 23 more species. And then a little tiny stop at this Colson Park, which nobody would think about. Had some great birds there along the river. So some of this is the picture at the intersection of the paved road and unpaved road. East Lick Road is not paved. We're basically announced that we're in Moult. And as you can see, there's not a whole lot there. Grasshopper sparrow, this is the pallidus subspecies, not the pratensis that we see here in migration in the east, or the floridanus, which is our local resident. So this is a western prairie subspecies of grasshopper sparrow. We had pronghorn, and then we had vesper sparrows, which were probably one of the most numerous sparrows out in this area. They were everywhere, and with the babies in various molts, molts and molts, but really gave us some fits at times for IDs with the varying plumage. And on the pictograph.
Gallus,
Yes.
could we back up to the prairie?
Absolutely.
So the prairie area was huge. That was obviously the definition of big sky for us. And that day when we were out there, I have a picture of us. We're kind of at the top of a hill and looking out, and there's nothing. There's one dirt road, and we're in the middle of nowhere. And I'm thinking, if anything happens to us, they won't find us for days or weeks. I mean, it was in the middle of nowhere, and it was just flat, and the big sky was just beautiful, and the photos just did not do it justice. The birds out there were good, and it was great. It was much easier to see the birds on the prairie than it was when we got into the mountains with the trees and all that, obviously. And we had a lot of good sightings and a lot of good looks at birds on the prairie. And of course, we had fence posts and barbed wire, so they would sit up and see who was coming. So it was a lot of fun. And as Gallus was mentioning, I think 50% of the photos I have of the birds had food in their mouths. They were going to nest. So mid-July, they were feeding chicks, and our birds down here had finished up mostly. So that was very interesting as well.
Yeah, they had and some of them were, probably double brooding too, because we had a lot of ones that were young birds already fledged in addition to the adults, really carrying a lot of food. And the other part of this whole area we learned is there's a lack of restrooms.
Yes, we did.
So pictograph cave. So this is really cool. So it's really hard to see, but in the upper right, those red marks, that is some of the pictographs in the cave there. They're really faded, so they, unless you're right there, they're very difficult to see. Even when I had this zoomed in with my really nice camera, they were really difficult to pick off the wall. And this is the ghost cave, and each one of these balls is supposed to represent, I guess, one of the little ghost heads of the cave. So we had this male lazuli bunting that just sat in the picnic area there, up on, right outside the picnic area, and just sat there and just, the downside was it was terrible lighting because you're shooting up into the blue sky, but it was such a cooperative bird. And this is one of the peregrine falcons we had on the trip. This one flew right over us, gave us really nice views. I was able to get a couple of shots off before it went out and over the cliffs. So the next day we left Billings and heading toward Glacier. So we're basically crossing the prairie here. So this was a pretty long drive day. It's about 4 hours of driving, not counting the stops. So the first thing is we headed up at Highway 87 outside of Roundup, where we had 15 species along the highway. And then we made a wrong turn onto Horse Creek Road, which turned out to be not actually a bad birding spot. The downside was the areas, there's no cell service. So even with the navigation trying to get us there, wanted to take us through a proper estate game lands that was locked up due to COVID. So we couldn't get through on the road it wanted us to take. So in the end, we did find our way where we were going, which was Lake Masson National Wildlife Refuge, where we had 36 species. And then we went on with a really quick, right before dark, run through of Benton Lake National Wildlife Refuge. So the picture here, that's Lake Masson. That's the wetland there where the American avocet at the beginning was actually photographed. So these are a few of the birds we had. We had lark bunting, horned lark, a lot of horned larks, a western meadowlark, which became the joke bird of this trip because every time we saw a bird, it was like western meadowlark. It was either western meadowlark or Vesper sparrow that seemed to be the two birds that seemed to be the most common. The McCown's longspur, which is now thick-billed longspur, and then the Wilson's phalarope. And we're going to see some more pictures from this area when I have a little slideshow at the end. So the next day we reached Glacier, and it took us a little while to get ourselves in there too because of COVID and road closures and things like that, but it all worked. So we had 26 species in Glacier, but you don't go to Glacier for the birds, you go to Glacier for the views. This is just one of the shots I took. Dale took some of Dale's photos are just amazing. So this is lower to Medicine Lake. This was like our little detour to get around to the entrance. It's one way in, one way out on this trip. So the view here, this picture does not do this justice at all. It doesn't. Absolutely spectacular. The lake with the trees and the sky and everything, just indescribable. So this is from a shot of the I believe these are columbine at Logan Pass, which is one of the high point rest areas on the road to the sun, and another shot of the glacier from one of the pullouts. But of course, we did have other things, mammals. So we had a Columbian ground squirrel. This one we thought was sick for a while and just sitting there on this tree stump. It just wouldn't move. We're all taking pictures of it and it just sits there. So we're hiking the trail. This is near the visitor center here. So we're hiking this trail back here and we're looking for birds. And I look down and hear this in eating the berries down here. This is black bear. So we decide that it's not such a good idea to keep going with this black bear. So we end up turning around. Well, thankfully, the black bear made us turn around because in the next slide, we'll see the mammal bear. That's me. Very hairy, kind of similar. So a couple of this Road to the Sun's one of the tunnels, and the historic Lake McDonald Lodge. As far as playing with the camera filters, I like to do that. So here's the bird up in the upper right, three-toed woodpecker. This bird we would not have gotten if the bear didn't make us turn around.
Yep.
And one of the few life birds I actually had the chance of getting on this trip. And I actually had a spot all planned out for a stop for this bird, for the group. And we didn't need to go there. It showed up at just one of our regular stops at the visitor center. So it's very cooperative. And then the cedar waxwing, I think everybody got great pictures of this bird just sitting in the parking lot.
Yeah, that was great.
Then this mountain goat here, you can see as a radio color, the rangers ended up shooing this guy away because he's too friendly up at Logan Pass. And this is a red crossbill that I had in the parking lot. Nice male red crossbill.
As many of us know, sometimes the best birding's in the parking lot. So
Yes. So, and I did take recordings of one of the crossbills and send it up to eBird for analysis for which type it was, and I haven't heard back yet. So hopefully they eventually get back to me when they catch up with all their recordings. So the next day, we headed for Yellowstone. This was probably the longest drive of the trip. It's quite a ways, about 5 hours ish, heading from Glacier down to Yellowstone. We made a stop at Lolo National Forest. I didn't even know this national forest existed, but we found it by accident, and it was some really good birding. We had 23 species. This is the lake, like there at Lolo. And we made a random stop that actually was really nice at Anaconda rest area, has a historic site. And then we finally got to Gardner outside of Yellowstone, which was our final stop before heading into Yellowstone the next day. So,
and at one of those stops, you all saw a shrew. I know that was a big mammal for most.
yes, that was at Lolo. None of my photos of the shrew came out well enough, I felt, to put in the presentation, but I believe it was a black-faced shrew was what we identified it as.
About that big.
Yeah, really tiny, very maybe 3 inches long.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So this is one of the markers from the rest area we randomly stopped at. It's a historic marker. I guess there was an old copper smelting plant there way back. And while we were there, this is it's really hard to see, but that's a riding satyr. I actually took a picture of while we were there. They blend in with the dead grasses that were out behind the visitor center / restrooms there. And the flowers here, these look like a species of Liatris actually, but I'm not sure. That's a picture of the prairie out behind the visitor center. It's absolutely beautiful habitat. So, and when we got to Gardner, there was a big adventure going on. One of the local saloons caught fire, ended up burning ice cream parlor and everything else. But you have to understand, this is a very tiny town. So they only had one little fire engine, and they were bringing in all the fire engines from nearby, which are mostly brush trucks, until they could get some of the bigger equipment in from some of the bigger towns from over an hour away. They were bringing fire trucks in to put this out. So it was, and everybody in town was up there.
And it was very sad.
It was sad, but it was an interesting way to arrive. That's for sure. It wasn't boring. So the next day, this is probably the park I think most of us look most forward to, was Yellowstone. We probably could have spent a whole week here and exploring all the ins and outs of Yellowstone. There's so much to see there. So we had 51 species. This is the entry sign. A few of the stuff we saw while we were there. Chipping sparrow. This was at one of the hot springs. You can see it has a food carry going on. Columbian ground squirrel. There are a whole bunch of these at the picnic area. Then we had this coyote that was hunting probably voles or something like that in the grasses here. And at the Old Faithful Lodge, there was a nest, several nesting pairs of violet green swallows up in the rafters. And I just happened to get this one adult just kind of looking down over the young are tucked up underneath the rafters there. So these are a few of the sights. Like I said, you have to go out here to really appreciate the color. None of these photos, you know, no matter how good your camera is, really do it justice. This is from the top of the geysers at Mammoth, looking out over the little town of Mammoth, or the little, I guess, national parks with all the visitor center and everything else, the old garrison there. These are the mud pots, Old Faithful and Old Faithful Lodge. So then we headed from Yellowstone, we headed south to Grand Teton. And that next day we had 50 species kind of split between them because we had to drive through Yellowstone to get down to the Grand Teton. So on the way out, you know, we had American bison. This is from the top of Signal Mountain. I photographed this pine siskin, and Clark's nutcracker at the one spot we stopped at. And this one was very cooperative. I still can't get over the size of the bill on this bird.
Yep.
And I must have taken 50 shots, and that was the only one that came out because they just wouldn't sit still.
No.
So as we went south, we stopped at this at Lewis Falls, really pretty spot. We went past Lake Jackson. And then, of course, this is from the top where we had picnic lunch at the top of Signal Mountain. So the next day, again, we're still down by Grand Teton. So this is a shot from historic Mormon Row historic site. So as the Mormons kind of moved west into this area, they set up a settlement here, and it's actually I think we could spend all day taking pictures there. Between the birds and the site, we probably could have spent a long time there. So this is from the site. We had a tree swallow, decided to be very cooperative. Great Basin fritillary. These were up at Signal Mountain. I was able to get this picture. We had this little baby snake, which I haven't been able to key out. So that I managed to get a couple pictures of in the grass. It was really cute. It couldn't have been more than a foot long. Grand Teton, the visitor center. And then we stopped at the Chapel of the Sacred Heart. That's the little plaque on the thing. And we're looking around for moose, and it took us quite a while, but eventually we did find a moose. So this was at there's a pond here. We had some really good birding at this location, and the female moose just kind of wandered out and was feeding, being very cooperative. We ended up seeing a nice male later on, but the views were not as good because it was across the river. Some more shots of historic Mormon Row. Like I could have spent all day here taking photographs. It was such a photographic area and a lot of great birds. Shot one of the gaps in the Grand Teton. So then after we left that, we had to head back to Billings. So we went the scenic route. The drive was about 5.5, 6 hours, I guess, with all the stops and everything, over the Beartooth Highway. So we had 22 species up there. This was one of the stops we made at Rock Point Vista. You can see the elevation, 9,190 feet. So there's the summit. We stopped at the summit, 10,947. We were way up there. So the views here were probably some of the most beautiful ones we had on the trip, outside of Glacier. Being up so high with the valleys and everything. This is a picture of Beartooth Lake, and this is a variable checker spot. This was up at the summit here at 10,000 feet up. And you can see what how the vegetation is. There's no trees. We're above the tree line. So, you know, this little butterfly is basically in the grass here. And we had American pipits doing food carries up here, running around. So it was absolutely amazing. So we're going to have we'll go through some, because like I said, so many great pictures we could have used, and there's no way to do it all justice. But this is one of Dale's photos. A lot of these are Dale's, of the cactus on the rocks. And this was on Eastlick Road. Try to give you an idea of exactly what the prairies, kind of open plains look like against the mountains. Brush. We heard a lot more of these than we saw. The rapids. Glaciers. I believe this is columbine, I believe, isn't it? The yellow flower. I'm not positive. It's at Logan Pass. Roosevelt Lodge. There's some good birds here. Common raven. This was just perched right next to the vehicles. Didn't have a care in the world.
Hoping we'd feed him.
Probably. The historic Mormon Row, we had this family of magpies that were flying around. This is just 3 of them, but there were some juvies in there because there was some begging behavior going on. Yeah. So they still wanted to be fed by the parents, and the parents didn't seem to be quite having a whole lot of that at this point. They're like, I think they were getting to the point where you're old enough to feed yourself, go make your own dinner.
Right.
So Continental Divide. We passed over the Continental Divide a couple of times on the trip as you weave through Yellowstone and everything. So we were able to stop here and get one shot of it. This photo, this was on the accidental road that we turned onto right at the beginning. And Dale got this great picture of the Red Cross bill with the moon behind it. And that's just amazing shot.
Well, they were both there.
They were both there. And I noticed the bird, I noticed the moon. I didn't take a picture of either. I was so busy looking for birds. So,
as you should have been.
yes. And then Arctic Bluet. This show, we did not just focus on birds. We did butterflies, we did dragonflies, and mammals.
I joined a couple groups on Facebook to help with the identification on the butterflies and the bugs, and that was very helpful, and it was very interesting. It's always interesting to me. I always think of butterflies as girly, but it's usually the men who are the experts when it comes to butterflies. And 2 of the gentlemen on the page that I was on with the butterfly IDs, they had not seen some of the butterflies we had seen, so they wanted to know the locations, which with Gallus's excellent detailed directions or locations, we were able to give them that, so they were pleased. So
I have a little bit of OCD with the checklists.
It worked.
Yeah. So this is a white-faced ibis in full breeding plumage. We get these in Florida occasionally. This here was probably there was a couple of this is a female greater sage grouse. And this is probably one of the best birds of the trip to see. Very cryptic species.
For me.
It was a lifer for me as well. And it took a while to ID. I mean, I was pretty sure of what it was after I looked at the photographs, and then I sent it to one of the local reviewers and to get a second opinion, just to make sure, because this bird is not where we were, is not exactly a very common species. Some of the areas where this bird is more numerous, we didn't have any luck with. In this particular location, sharp-tailed grouse should have been the dominant grouse species for much of the area we were working, along with gray partridge and ringneck pheasant. But this bird is out there, it's just very rare, and we just happened to be lucky that they just wandered across the road in front of us. All my photos got shot through the windshield because I parked the vehicle so all the people could get photographs themselves, not worry about myself. So Dale thankfully got a really nice one for me to use.
Well, it was like a little oasis. We had been on this road for a long time and it was rather dry. And then all of a sudden we came up on this little bit of cattails and a little ditch. And goodness, that's where we had foul ropes and the grouse. It was very productive, that little spot before we got to the lake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really productive. So Dale was very good about remembering to take pictures of some of the other things out there as well. So she got a great shot at the entry sign at Pompey's Pillar. And then, of course, the rafting bears, family of bears. And then the red squirrel, because I thought the sign was amusing. I had to add it to the
It was amusing. And when we got to this area, this was our last day before our last day, before we travel day, there was a huge, I don't know what you call them, but a group of motorcycles, like hundreds and thousands of motorcyclists. So they were all pulling in here as well. So
yeah, I forget the name of the town we were in as we went over Beartooth, but yeah, they had the big motorcycle rally going on.
yeah.
So this is why we went, or one of the reasons we went. It took us on our way out of the park, actually. This is on our way out toward the Beartooth Highway, that we finally actually got the big herd of bison. Up to this point, we've been finding bison like, oh, there was one here, or 3 there. We had one walk right next to the car so close you could reach out and touch it, which we didn't do, by the way, unlike other people. But this was the first time we actually had, like, there's probably over 100 of these out in these, on the plains here.
Yep.
So black-tailed prairie dogs, another yellow-bellied marmot, that's from Pictograph. Elk, that was on our way up to Signal Mountain.
Yeah, he was gorgeous.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. These guys here were all up, and there was a red-tailed hawk sitting in the background. I'm pretty sure he was that these guys want, some of these are future lunch, probably. That's why he was hanging out. So I want at least a picture of the group in here. So this is us having our picnic up at Signal Mountain, and the other one here is I believe this is at Pictograph.
Yes.
I believe that's us taking
Lazuli.
at the Lazuli bunting. Yes.
Heard that.
So the trip summary, we had 154 bird species. We had 22 species of mammals. I'm not sure how many butterflies and dragonflies we had. We didn't really keep a count, and everybody had pictures of this one and that one, and we didn't correlate it.
I probably had at least 25 dragonflies.
At least. And the butterflies, we probably had, I myself, I think for certain I had about 20 different species of butterflies. We were out there, and we probably had way more than that with everybody looking at different things. There were a lot of butterflies. So now's the time for you guys to interrogate Dale and I for your questions about the trip. This is a picture from Clark's Fork picnic area, the rapids there.
If there are any questions. But while we're stopped, I want to mention it's a 6 DVD set of Ken Burns' The National Parks, America's Best Idea. Since we've gotten back, I watched some single DVDs of his before we went, but since we returned, I did this, and it's the history of the U.S. and the national parks, and it is quite moving. I've learned a great deal, and plan on putting some of that information to good use when we go back one of these days. But if you can check it out from the library, that's what I did. You can keep it out up, you can renew up to 3 times, and it's a great view. If you're stuck at home, it's a wonderful thing to watch. I would recommend it. Again, that's filmed by Ken Burns, The National Parks, America's Best Idea. And I have to say that's certainly true. Those parks were unbelievable, and there's so many others out there to see.
Yeah, there was a lot of bird. I wish I could have. I mean, I couldn't put every single bird species we saw, but some other great species you saw. We had chestnut-collared longspurs. We had ferruginous hawk on nest. We had harlequin duck. There was a lot of amazing birds out there that we got to enjoy really nice views at. We had prairie falcon, we had the peregrine falcons. So we had a whole bunch of different ducks. We had the trumpeter swans. It was a great trip.
On the ferruginous hawks, I looked them up when I got back and read more about them. I'd seen them in Eastern Washington, and it was so similar, their nesting on this trip. They were on high power poles. The parents were sitting on one set of high power poles, and then there was at least two juveniles who were, I would say, pretty close to fledging. But I looked up, and black-tailed prairie dogs are top on their list for meals, and the prairie dogs were right there, so they had didn't have far to go for a meal.
Right underneath their nest.
Yeah,
There was a little colony there.
it was a beautiful area, beautiful birds.
The prairie was gorgeous. It's hard to describe the prairie without actually seeing it. Pictures, you just can't get the view of the prairie with like she's describing, with basically you just have a road that cuts through nothing but grassland, and there's just nothing out there on either side. It's just the land and the sky, and as far as you can see. So really difficult to kind of get the vastness of it.
Yep.
And in Florida here, you can't go very far anymore in Florida without hitting development or something, or a shopping mall. And there it's like we drove hours across the dirt road and didn't see another human being. It was just open grassland with birds and butterflies and dragonflies and mammals. One of the best mammals I think we saw was the American badger.
Oh yeah.
But we had a couple of those terrible pictures, but really good. That was the first time I think I've seen badger. I was really excited for that one.
Yep, that was it.
Almost I'd seen before.
We weren't looking for that, and it just happened in front of us. They're very interesting looking.
Yes, and then we had one. We had the one wolf that was stalking the. What were they stalking? The elk?
Pronghorn.
Pronghorn, that's it, the pronghorns.
Lisa spotted the pronghorn, then she spotted the wolf, and but he did not go after them.
Yep. Yeah. So
we
waited for. So yeah, it was a great trip. Are there any questions that have come up?
For anyone who would like to ask any questions, you can use the Q&A. The chat's also available if you're not used to using the Q&A, but we can answer your questions if you have any.
Well, we won't prolong if no one has any questions, but thank you, Gallus, so much for the presentation.
You're more than welcome.
A wonderful trip.
I see, looks like something popped up in this one there.
Oh, we got, yep. Yes. Do you see them, Gallus?
I just clicked on, just open it up. This was the park open in spite of COVID. Yeah, the parks were open. The visitor centers were closed in most instances, or had very limited access. for the most part, I think the hardest thing in terms of anything was probably on the whole trip was probably restrooms, making sure we could find a restroom. So, because there were some areas that were very long stretches, but overall, other than a couple of entry, like where Glacier was only allowing entrance from one side, for the most part, we didn't really have a big problem. And because of COVID, the number of people inside the park was way down, which meant even though many of the sites could still be crowded as the day went on, the park was nowhere near as crowded as it would have been otherwise at that time of year. We probably would have not gotten to stop at some of the places we stopped at if it had been any other year. The next one, what was the weather like? I think we had beautiful weather every day. I can't think of any day that
Billings was getting warmer as we stayed there. The day that we left Billings and going to Glacier, it was supposed to be actually 100. So we were glad to be departing at that point.
And the temperature up in Glacier was what? I think we were in the 60s.
Yeah, it wasn't as cold as I expected, but
Yeah,
very pleasant.
Yeah. You wouldn't realize, I'm surprised I didn't get more sunburn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even in the prairie by the Tetons, it was lovely as well. It was probably in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think
Billings
we wore coats very often.
Yeah, Billings was the hottest of all the locations that we were at.
Where we flew in and out of.
Yeah, where we flew in and out of. But we didn't get rained out any day or anything like that. So we were able to get out birding every single day. And even though it was warm, it was a dry heat. As I, so
Yes.
if it had been 100 degrees here in Florida, I would have looked like. So we avoided that problem.
Yep, and no rain. The only time we saw rain was actually in the prairie area by the Tetons, but it was afar off because we have a huge prairie area there as well, just huge. And we could see the storm coming across the prairie, and we even saw some lightning, but I don't think we got anything but a little bit of sprinkle at any point. So
that's pretty much, the weather was on our side the whole trip.
Yeah, it was.
Thank you all I see some people said they enjoyed the presentation and appreciate that. When Dale puts this together again in a couple of years, make sure you sign up. See it for yourself. It's one of those places you have to go. It's like the Dry Tortugas. It's a place you can describe, but you have to go to in order to really appreciate it.
Yeah, it is.
Somebody asked next.
22, Maureen, 22. All right.
Okay, well, unless there are any other questions, I want to thank everyone who's participated tonight. I'd like to again thank our special guest, Gallus, with Archaeopteryx Birding and Nature Tours. I also want to personally thank you for your continued support of Clearwater Audubon. And although we cannot meet in person, we are still trying to stay connected. Be sure to check your email for our wing beat that's coming up this week. And if you're into social media, we're there too. We have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And this video, along with our last program, will be on our YouTube channel, and you can find that on our website.
Thank you.
Also, something I thought of that I should have voiced earlier. I will send you, Michelle, the link to my photos that anybody can look at. It goes straight. So if you want to see all the 600 plus photos, you're welcome to, and we'll get that up on the website if possible.
Great.
You should definitely check her photos out. She took some absolutely spectacular photographs.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
some of those photos and some really great stories from some of the people who went or in our last wing beat. So if you haven't seen that, there's some great stories there.
Yes. Yep.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We will see you next time.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.